I'm working with student founders or very early young founders. They need sometimes a lot of guidance support because they haven't developed something called what I call scar tissue. When you're in your 30s, you've had a lot of scar tissue because you've gone through life. You've had personal heartbreak, you've had professional failures and successes.
Yeah.
But when you're 20, you kind of, I wouldn't say you're a clean slate, but you're closer to a clean slate than you are in your 30s. Sometimes it's just kind of giving the right advice, the right guidance, the right mentorship, and helping them grow as well. And then they see that, okay, this person isn't just like checking me out for a fundraise, but they're also kind of helping me improve my thinking and also just kind of leveling me up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Fundraising Insiders podcast, the podcast where we see what's hiding behind the check and we put it inside the deck. And today we're again going to explore both sides. I know it's becoming a bit of a recurring theme where we have hybrid profiles, and Rohan is no other. He doesn't escape to that rule of having a hybrid profile. Rohan, you don't only have a hybrid profile in your career, but also in geography. Today we will tackle for the first time, and I'm really glad, the GCC ecosystem and also the EU and the bridge between the two, which is what you're doing, part of what you're doing with AvenirX Lab, which is the structure you'll tell us more about. So yeah, Rohan, really glad to have you on the show. Please introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you properly do? And how you came to do this, which is even more important in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And then to give you a bit more context on myself, I used to work for Germany's biggest asset manager for about a year, then decided I wanted to kind of move towards the VC or let's say the startup ecosystem. So I then joined a French growth stage fund. We did like 10 plus investments, deployed a bunch of capital. And then I decided I wanted to kind of move towards the away from the European landscape and more towards the Dubai space. So I moved to Dubai towards the beginning or middle of last year. And now what I do is I work with European startups that are looking to scale into this market, and also founders at like top European universities across like strong ecosystems in writing angel checks and getting them funding.
So let's see here, because you also had some of your career. I'm just relooking and rereading all of this, but you had some time with many different industries, many different formats as well, where you worked as an analyst for companies like there's Tetra Pak in there, and then there is some reporting companies, then there's M&A stuff. Like, it seems like you've been around the block and explored everything. So let's think about why startups? Like, why exploring all of these massive entities and eventually narrowing it down back to the simplest form of innovation?
Yeah, sure. So when you're working for large entities, the good thing is you have a lot of structure. The bad thing is you have a lot of structure. So sometimes it's just good to be able to kind of move around a little bit. And I find that I do better when there's lack of structure, or I can build my own structure. And that's something that startups allow you a lot, I believe. And also, many times when you're working in big corporations, you are a small cog in a giant wheel, but you can kind of change that when you're working with smaller teams, and they're also looking for more information and more help. And your value that you create is much more tangible and something you can see sometimes, not physically, obviously, but like in the way people are changing their thinking, or let's say the value that you provided and opening doors for them that they wouldn't be able to gain access to themselves, which makes a bigger impact at that stage than it does, let's say, for a giant entity with 5,000 people and like 20 plus like locations.
It feels closer to you, the direct impact.
Exactly.
I like the cogs and wheels analogy. Given your background, that's more than fitting. So I'm sure it was intended. But
yeah, of course.
Let's start with the beginning. So First Bridge Ventures, which is your time in Paris, 6 years, probably had a lot of baguette and all that stuff, maybe learn even some French. What are the key learnings you would say that in your current activity with AvenirX Labs, and we'll come to this, what are the key learnings that you took from there to what you're doing today with AvenirX? And then the second part of the question, which I think is the second layer, the more interesting one, is what did you make sure of not taking from that experience to the new structure? Because in the structured fund versus angel investing and spinning out from university, very different domains. So what did you bring to it, and what did you make sure you didn't?
Right. So First Bridge was my first job where I was doing investments. There was a lot to learn when it came to, let's say, understanding founder dynamics, understanding what market sizing is, how do you talk to potential founders? And then the most importantly, like, how do you structure term sheets, understand what's moving, what's not moving, because you can have a great deal, but if you don't understand term sheets, you might end up screwing yourself a little bit further down the line. So It was really kind of like a finishing school in how do you think as a VC and not just as someone who's like, hey, this is a cool company. But then when you get into nitty gritty of it, you realize maybe it's not going to work and what's not going to work. And the other thing was that First Bridge is growth stage fund, right? So we were investing Series A, Series B onwards. now I'm working on the pre-seed and seed. So there's a different dynamic to it. So nowadays, a lot of times I am just looking at the founder, the founding team, because everything can and will change by Series B. But what's never going to change is the team itself, you know? So that's the part that I'm really now focused and geared towards. And I think that makes a big difference as well. And then I do angel investment, but I also do syndications. So, because I built a network of family office and high net worth individuals that join with me on like co-investments. And that's been something that I've learned a lot about how to build relationship dynamics and like how to kind of get strategics involved and sometimes
Right.
even fight for deals. Because when you're a big fund, you don't have to fight as much for deals. But when you're, let's say, a small entity, you have to kind of position stuff right. And that makes a lot of difference. But at the same time, it's more valuable when you get something right.
Before we jump into the part of what you didn't take from the large structure to the smaller structure, I want to bounce back exactly on what you said, the part of fighting for a deal. We often hear people saying, hey, we share deal flow with XYZ, but we all know deep down, if there's a hot deal, it's mine and I'm going to keep it for myself. When people are already on it and it feels like, well, you're not the only one on the flower with all the juicy pollen. There's tons of bees around it. How do you make a space for yourself? My mildly educated guess is that you need to bring more than just money and a name, which is what the big funds usually have. So tell us more about this additionality and how you do it.
Yeah. Introductions to relevant people. So it could be, let's say that you are a fintech platform that's looking to work with private equity funds. So then I know a few private equity funds. I'll just connect you with people there. So they could be potential clients. So the thing is that if, let's say the check I'm writing is 100, 200K or whatever, I'm also bringing that or even more in terms of top line, you know, so that makes a big difference at the earliest stage because this company might just be doing 50 to 100K themselves. And suddenly, if they're getting a check that also kind of lets them double that in terms of revenues, that makes a big difference, you know? So doing the right introductions and quite often just speaking with founders because that's also because I'm working with student founders or very early young founders and they need sometimes a lot of guidance support because they haven't developed something called what I call scar tissue. You know, like when you're in your 30s, you've had a lot of scar tissue because you've gone through life. You've had personal heartbreak. You've had professional, what do you call failures and successes.
Yep.
But when you're 20, you kind of, yeah, I wouldn't say you're a clean slate, but you're closer to clean slate than you are in your 30s. So sometimes it's just kind of giving the right advice, the right guidance, the right mentorship and helping them grow as well. And then they see that, okay, this person isn't just like checking me out for a fundraise, but they're also kind of helping me improve my thinking and also just kind of leveling me up.
Right. So, I mean, it's really something that we have in common. I relate a lot to what you say. And I'd like to question you on that point, which is a bit outside of the discussion, but scar tissue is something that is a natural reaction if we speak on the biological sense. But in the figurative sense, as you were saying, it's something that requires an action to happen for it to grow. And how are you working with the barrier between living a heartbreak, as you were saying, or a commercial failure, a business failure, whatever, building the scar tissue and then having learnings versus you lending your perception of what a scar tissue is and the people learning from this? Like, where is the barrier or where is the limits of empirically growing that scar tissue versus just learning it from someone else? Like, how much can you learn versus things you just have to do to be able to perceive the learnings? How do you juggle with this?
No, that's an excellent question. And yeah, you can't, let's say, fast track experience to a certain extent because learning from failures is probably what grows you as a person, both professionally and like personally. But what you can do is if you start to give feedback and advice, that can kind of fast track things because I've always been of the opinion that like, you know, the most successful people are the ones that have been able to lean on even more successful people than them that were further down the line and kind of lean at like grow on their shoulders, you know? So if you have someone like that, that can, let's say, they can tell you about their scar tissue and you can kind of take some learnings from that to an extent as well.
Right.
It's not obviously the same as experience, but what it can do is it can get you 40 or 50% of the way there. And then the other thing as well is when I'm looking to work with a founder, I'm kind of building this relationship over 3 to 6 months. I'm also going to go see them as well. So it's not just, let's say, Zoom or video. So that makes a big difference. Spend time with them, you know, sometimes even like a week with them. And that really kind of helps you develop a bond. And then that time you can understand, is this person even willing to kind of take feedback and learn, or are they just looking for a check as well?
Yeah.
Because
Are they
sometimes
coachable?
Exactly. Coachable is a huge thing. Like you can be super smart, but if you're not coachable and you think at 19 or 20, you know everything, which I'm not saying I know everything or like a 19-year-old doesn't know more, but there's a lot to life that you haven't
I see.
experienced at 19, which you're going to experience, let's say, when you're 40, 50, 60.
Yeah. I can't unthink the bike behind you and the whole thing of learning when you're learning how to cycle and you just have to fall sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you have someone to look at, okay, how do they position themselves using the pedals, etc., that you can help them. So yeah, and you also do get a lot of scar tissue when you learn how to ride as the first time.
Literally.
But if you can provide at least the protection and be there to teach how to get back on it, that's what really matters. So really glad we opened up on that topic. And the topic of being coachable is something we tackled in some of the previous episodes. I will send you back when it will be published to episode 7 with Vincent Bierry, who is venture coach and actually started his career as a professional cyclist. So the whole loops. And he tells about the roles of being a coach. And then in terms of pitching, the episode with Alan Elston and Afonso, episode 8 and 9. So there's like a try series of episodes where we talk specifically about coaching. So more on those episodes. Now back to your career, what you went through in Paris and what you evolved into being AvenirX Labs. So now tell us a bit more about AvenirX. Maybe present the thesis, the kind of founders you back, and you have this double thing where you're juggling between the GCC ecosystem, and on the other side you also have spinning out from universities, some of them also in Europe. So please explain this whole ecosystem that you're building.
Yeah. So, when you're in Europe or the US, you look at, let's say, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Riyadh, and you kind of see the shininess of it. So I want to explore the shininess, I think I just wanted to experience something fast growing. And also, I'm Indian. So being here feels like I'm a bit closer to home as well.
Gotcha.
Compared to, let's say, you're in Paris as well. So that makes a big difference. And because as hard as I tried in Paris, it just wasn't a great place to find Indian food or curry. So, which is big difference here in Dubai.
London, come to London.
London for sure. Yeah, London for sure. But actually, that was interesting. When I was supposed to take the Eurostar last year to go to London, that was the only weekend the Eurostar was shut because it discovered a World War II bomb on the tracks. So I took that as a sign that I'm just not meant to be in London this year. So
fair enough.
Packed my bags and came to Dubai. And then the things that I'm working on besides, let's say, the Dubai expansion as well is I work with a lot of mature founders as well. So these are people that are in the 30s and 40s as well. And they have, let's say, worked in corporate for the last 10 to 15 years. And they've decided that, hey, I want to build a startup. Excellent product, guys. Excellent at, let's say, execution, but not so much excellent on, let's say, the side of how do you do fundraising, how do you do investor storytelling, how do you do pitches, So that's also what I do a lot as well. So that's why I'm also juggling a lot of time in Europe as well, because I'm constantly making them more fundable and then also getting them access to people within the network or people that could also help them close around and just do investor storytelling and pitching as well.
When you say introduced to doing all the fundraising part and introduced to investors, would you say your investor network is more active or is it wider in Europe or in the GCC, or are you growing one more than other? I believe dynamics are very different as well.
Yeah. It's very different. The UAE specifically is filled with a lot of ex-operators from the UK and Europe who are still quite young. They're still in their 30s and 40s, and they have a lot of time and resources on their hand. So they are keen on, let's say, becoming strategic partners for some of the startups that I work with. So they're not just putting a check, but they're also, let's say, saying that, hey, I can connect you with this person, or hey, I can give you this advice. Maybe you're an edtech company. I used to have, let's say, a university that I ran or an edtech platform myself as well. So I can kind of give you mentorship on that. So that's kind of the play with, let's say, the GCC guys. And the European ones are a bit more different because they're a bit more on the institutional side. So they are more keen on, let's say, having the right numbers, the right figures, the right traction, so it's a bit different between the two. I wouldn't necessarily discount either of them. I think they both have the merits. And I think, as you know, growing those relationships takes time. It's not just something you can have over coffee or let's say one lunch and okay, cool, let's get to work. The ex-operators, are people that successfully exited the company in the UK, in the domestic market. So this would be UK, Europe.
Okay.
And now they moved to the UAE because they like the weather or just a change of pace for them as well. And they feel very welcomed to an extent. So this could also be people, let's say, who are in their 50s and let's say they've been corporate for 30 years and they've decided that, okay, we've done enough. A lot of bankers here, ex-lawyers that have just settled down and they build a lot of communities because they find a lot of their similar people as well. So it's just a great way for them to connect and feel as if they're not, it's very open. It's very different in that sense compared to Europe.
I get the openness that you're saying, and it's probably a hard thing. Again, it has to be empirical. You have to live it to experience it, to understand it. And it sounds borderline counterintuitive when you think about angels and smart capital, so not institutional. It sounds harder to reach because those people don't have a website online where they say, hey, I put my money in XYZ thing. So what would be your advice to access this kind of network? Is it just come to Dubai or come to any other GCC countries? And even if you say, okay, you just have to come here, when I'm here, what do I do? Apart from, of course, reaching out to you and having your support. But if anyone is looking to do this, what would be your key advice to get into the GCC scene? The key, maybe also business manners to learn? What are the ways to do this? What would be your key advice for someone who's starting in that?
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong approach, obviously, and there's no business I try to follow because different people require different strokes of life. So I think have been lucky in the sense that it's been easy for me through my hobbies. So I like playing tennis. So I've just gone to kind of tennis communities, been able to meet with some really successful people from that as well. I recently got into spirituality as well, and like mindfulness. And
Okay.
that's been also a great community of people. So that's actually been super good because I am by far the youngest person in that group, and all
Okay.
the others look at me as, let's say, not as a kid, but I just like someone they can mentor. And that's kind of been a good opener for me as well, to an
Okay.
extent, I feel. And then when you go to events, so I'm never pitching that, hey, I'm looking for investment. I'm just, because the thing is, it's kind of like dating. You kind of want to
Mm,
validate the other person as well, to an extent. You want to see, do I want to spend time with this person?
yeah.
So once you grab a few coffees, maybe watch a football game together, so one thing that I need to get into maybe is golf, because I've heard golf is great for networking, but I have had zero affinity to it, and I don't. The only time I played was Top Golf, and it was the most frustrating thing in my life. So I don't know how real golf would work, but yeah. So I think it's just about hobbies, and also this is a place that has an insane amount of events. On
Right.
any given week, you can find 5 to 7 events to go to, and you can find some really, really cool people. And I found that people over here are much more open to have a conversation or
Okay.
have a coffee with you after. So that's been quite encouraging.
So you don't necessarily need to be in a network first because those events is like, okay, where do I find those events? You just walk around and there's events like this. Like the European scene has no problem, or EU, US, I would say the more consolidated scene. What I've heard from investors is that the signal is not the problem. Like people know stuff, but the problem is the access. And access means having access to, for example, groups that are exclusive. Here, you're mentioning things like those exclusive groups are not necessarily so exclusive, or at least are more open to take people in. So yeah, run me through. Let's do a bit of a role play here. I land in UAE, and I'm like, okay, Rohan, I've got this project. I got 2-3 weeks in the UAE. I don't really know what to do. Like, how do I start? Yeah, I play tennis. I'm going to go to tennis. Top golf. Also, top golf, you're in your own little box. You're never going to talk to the people next to you. It's a bit different. But yeah, there's tennis, but what else? How do I find those events? How do I go? And the second part is, how do I approach those events? Do I prepare for this? Do I go out with business cards? Is that a way that people do? Or are people allergic to business cards? Which would be the opposite of Japan, for example. Japan has very
Sure.
specific manners. So tell me more maybe about like how to approach it, the business manners in the GCC, and how do you make a good impression? How do you fast track and you make the most out of your 2-3 weeks you spend there?
Sure. So the first thing to do is you check your immediate network. You see who are people that you know, maybe from your university days, from your high school time, or from your different jobs, to see, are they based in Dubai?
Right.
If they
Okay.
are, just that's the fastest connection because they kind
Gotcha.
of know you already. And you'd be surprised just the amount of people that have moved. Because I studied in the UK, so I think that from that I was able to find quite a few people here already working. So that's like the first approach, and just kind of go to them, speak to them. They will tell you about the different things that are happening, and that's gonna set the ball rolling to an extent as well. Then the other thing as well is, you can ask, I think now ChatGPT or Claude about give you a list of the most promising, let's say, events that are happening as well to an extent.
Right.
And one of the things as well is there's no fast track to, let's say, learning if this event is bad or good until you're there and you
Mm.
realize you wasted the evening or you've made the most out of the evening,
Yeah.
so that takes pattern recognition as well. So that's something that it's hard to do in 2 or 3 weeks. But if you stay here for 2 or 3 months, you can understand which are the good ones and which are not. So that helps a lot to an
Gotcha.
extent as well.
Okay.
And I go in without, let's say, a clear strategy. I'm just looking to have a good conversation with the right person. So sometimes this person isn't even strategic for me, but they just are very like, we have a lot of shared interests. You
Right.
talk to them, and then after half an hour or 45 minutes of discussion, you kind of come across something that you kind of share, or they know the right people as well. And then they're like, oh, hey, I can connect you with this person. That's something which I really like about this region, is that it's like, let's say when you see a piece of cake, and sometimes I find that in Europe, when people see a piece of cake, they're like, okay, what's my slice out of this?
Mm.
Here, I find when they see a piece of cake, they're like, okay, how can we make this cake bigger?
Mm-hmm.
There's this mentality of, let me introduce you to this person, let me refer you to that person, you know? So,
Gotcha.
so that makes a big difference as well, because people are a lot more collaborative and they're wanting to make the pie bigger, you know? So,
Right.
so I think that makes a big difference as well. And then I think it just being a little bit extroverted as well, or just faking it a little bit to an extent as well, because even if you're introvert, you can sign up, go to events, and as you start talking to people, you realize everyone is just looking to have a good time. You know, they're
Right.
all also
Okay.
human beings. So
Now, I'm going to throw a pebble in the cogs here and be sort of devil's advocate. Some people, especially funds, if they see their founders are always attending events and events and events and not really focusing on the work to do, they might be thinking, okay, when are you actually working? You go to events left and right, you drink a lot of champagne, super nice, but get shit done is the mentality of some people. So sometimes you go to those events and, as you say, it's a hit or miss. Aren't you afraid that sometimes the efficiency of such technique is not as good as being more methodical about it? And if not, what was the argument that you back behind the fact that it is worth that time being spent, at least for a founder? And then we'll talk about the same thing for an investor standpoint.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, when you're an early stage founder, you go to events because you might be, let's say, looking for you have an ICP in mind, and you kind of
Right.
want to pitch that to potential, let's say, people that could be a sales target, you know? So I think there's obviously a healthy mix of it as well, because the founder journey is a bit lonely, you know? So
Okay.
sometimes going to events is a way to kind of, let's say, relax, de-stress, meet with other founders that are on the same journey. And it can kind of give you a little bit of motivation as well. Because when you talk to other people that are on the same journey or the same boat as you, and you share your load, the load doesn't feel as big. So that could be a great way for, let's say, through events to do that. But obviously, if you're spending Monday to Sunday on events, like when are you
Yeah.
actually growing a company? Because at a certain point, investors and people will want to see returns. They'll also want to see progress, right? So I'm not saying that you spend all the time at events, but like be strategic about it. So let's say you were a food tech startup. There's a big
Mm-hmm.
thing here called Gulf Food that happens. Going there for a week could be worth 3 months of cold outreaches, you know, if you're
I see what
strategic
you mean.
about it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you go to every single event, but you just be strategic and you see that this is a week where if you're fully dedicated to, let's say, meeting the right people and building the right connections, it can just make your whole year.
Okay. That's what you mean. So I'm a bit conscious of time. We have our second part of the podcast. This I want to initiate because I want to dig a bit deeper in the whole GCC ecosystem, maybe compare it a little bit with the European ecosystem a bit later on. So let's jump into phase two. So phase two of the podcast is rapid fire questions. Basically, very simple. I give you multiple options. You answer which one, or yes or no type format. And try to not overthink it too much. Don't worry, it's made to be fast so that there's a discussion. So if you hear me asking a question and you think both are good or none, feel free to say both or none, and we'll come back to it and we'll detail the answers after this. So, all right. Yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the this or that format. So let's try to do this with a GCC approach. This is I'm very happy that you're here on the show and we get for the first time to talk about this ecosystem. We've talked about EU and US a lot. So I want to take these questions with a GCC mentality and then we can probably compare those. So let's go. First of all, the most active place in the GCC for you would be Dubai or Abu Dhabi or any other.
Dubai.
Family office, VC fund, or angel investors, which one is the most common in the GCC?
Family offices and angel investors.
Companies in the Middle East or companies approaching the Middle East, should they come in with an approach that is more strategically VC targeted or just show their market readiness?
I think market readiness makes a big difference.
So it's more about the execution than anything else.
Yep.
Do you feel like investors in the GCC put more importance on the company, the project, and its development, or the founders themselves?
Depends on the stage, but generally founders.
Is that something that you feel is more important in the GCC than in other parts of the world?
Compared to Europe, yeah, I think sometimes Europe wants to focus more on the traction side of things.
Gotcha. So would you say that the Europe is more risk averse than the GCC?
To a certain extent, Yes, but to a certain extent also no, depending on, let's say, what sector you're focused on.
Okay. For you with AvenirX Labs and your network of investors, do you prefer backing a student founder or a serial entrepreneur?
I hate that question. It's, I mean, my thesis is student founder, so I'm obviously going to go with student founder.
Right. Okay. Do you define yourself as a sector-specific fund or an agnostic fund?
Agnostic.
Do you invest only in the GCC or invest elsewhere in the world?
I invest across Europe and the GCC, but generally Europe.
Are you a relationship first person or a product first person?
Relationship first.
Would you rather jump in a deal as a one lead check or always look to create a syndicate when possible?
One lead check could work as well.
Okay. Now, say I am a non-GCC company looking to get in the GCC. Should I look for GCC investors or is there no added value for this?
There's definitely added value to having a GCC invest on the cap table.
And now say the opposite. I'm a GCC company looking to grow out of the GCC. Is it better to take investment from outside or do you think that the backing from home capital has a specific value behind it?
There's definitely specific value, but once you're at the Series B, Series C stage, you want to get, let's say, European investors and just for the right story.
Gotcha. Personally speaking, do you rather back technical founders or commercial founders if you have to pick just one?
Technical founders.
What matters more, events or LinkedIn?
Oof. A good event could be a month of LinkedIn.
Okay. And finally, say your vision of the GCC in 5 years. Is it more like something that will become like a Silicon Valley, something that will become like the European ecosystem, or do you think it's going to become its own new form of investment industry?
I think it's going to become its own new form. I think they learn from each different success and failure, and then they're kind of building their own path.
Gotcha. All right. So that's the first part of the this or that. I know there were a few curveballs where there were yes and no's because I had to bounce back on some of these, but I was actually going to think that the events or LinkedIn question was you were going to answer events immediately and you had a bit of a hesitation. So can you explain, you said in the end events instead of LinkedIn, but there was a bit of a hesitation. Can you explain that hesitation?
Yeah, I think, I think LinkedIn is probably the best funnel for marketing now that exists for professionals. I mean, you can argue Twitter or X as well to an extent, but that's more American.
Right.
You just don't see that much in Europe or the
Okay.
GCC to an extent. And the reason why I said that is because you never know when you're going to an event. And if you're spending, like, sometimes, you get really lucky and you find the right positioning on LinkedIn. And then let's say 2 or 3 hours of outreaches or 2 or 3 hours of, let's say, doing work on it can lead to, let's say, a few weeks of
Right.
traction straight away. So which is
Gotcha.
something that events sometimes you're not able to do because they're big. You might end up spending 3 hours and not meeting the right person sometimes as well.
You had a bit of hesitation as well in the question of the student founder versus serial entrepreneur. The standard investor might opt for the serial entrepreneur because of, well, it's seasoned entrepreneur. And you mentioned you loved curry, so you can't have something that is not seasoned. Pun intended aside. What about student founders that are not necessarily seasoned? And why did you make that your thesis? Why going this bold way of the plain rice with no seasoning? Why?
I wouldn't say student founders are plain rice, but I see what you mean. At the same point, it's because I think it's never been easier to build a startup. You don't need to, let's say, have the kind of resources you need to do previously. You can build a startup from your parents' garage now, with the amount of AI tooling that's out there at the moment. And also, I think they are an underfunded and underutilized source because most of the times VCs are looking for let's say, the right signal. So serial entrepreneurs are a great signal. I just think that that's missing out a lot of talent. So, and I think there's a huge pipe of very, very strong talent and technical guys in European and GCC universities that are just waiting for funding and
Right.
people just aren't open to it at times. And so, which is what is the case. But I feel some cities in Europe, you're almost too late when you're going towards student founders. Like I was spending time in Munich last month and one of the investors there told me something interesting where he said that they're now going towards high school students because the student founder thesis is almost tapped out. That's just a Munich centric thing because of just the amount of ecosystem that is there for the top for the top students, top universities that now at high school already they're getting poached.
Right. Did I introduce you to Maxim from Cambridge Future Tech?
Yes, I had a call with them on Friday.
How did that go, by the way? I know we're doing a bit outside the podcast, but Maxim also joined us on an episode. If you haven't watched that episode, to our audience, please go check it. It's going to be probably episode number 11, and this today is going to be 19 or 20. But yeah, it's interesting because they also do spinning out from universities, and this is why I thought it was so pertinent. So what did you, if you don't mind sharing maybe bits of that conversation and bits where you agreed or maybe had different visions of the way they do it in the UK, and I know they do also do it worldwide, versus maybe certain things that you saw with your endeavors in Europe and in the GCC?
Yeah. So Just as context, I think Maxime is working at Cambridge Future Tech. So they have a very interesting thesis where they're kind of backing and working with spinouts,
Yeah.
which is a super hard game. But at the same time, I think they provide an insane amount of value add because you're working with people that are very, very smart in terms of research, but sometimes need help and let's say translating their research. And I think Maxine, judging by the portfolio, is doing incredibly well. They've got 16 companies at the moment, 18 companies at the moment, and a lot of them are very, very strong. And they have a deep tech focus because I think sometimes we are leaning a little bit towards B2B SaaS, but I
Okay.
think deep tech is very, very interesting. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot of deep tech focused founders and deep tech winners that are going to come out because Europe is now betting heavily on that space. And I think we're going to see some great stuff happening there.
Gotcha. So that it was more of a sector difference. Now, in terms of the strategy, because of that sector difference and maybe also the geographical difference, what is it that you think is different when trying to scale out or to spin out, should I say, from student founders, companies in the B2B SaaS world specifically, and in the
Well, I
GCC or in
mean,
Europe?
yeah, sure. So commercially, it's a lot easier because you're selling a subscription, right?
Mm,
It's easier to scale that. And
right.
you can just go to market super easily. But when you're deep tech, sometimes you're not even going to market at seed. You might be going to market at Series A just because you need the amount of, let's say, resources and capital to build the right solution, especially if you focus, let's say, on med tech or health tech in the deep tech space, because of regulatory concerns or what have you. That's the one thing. And also, I think that's a layer that's missing in the GCC because there's still a bit of a focus on fintech, prop tech solutions, simply because of the idiosyncrasies of this market. But we're seeing slowly a change of that because they're now heavily investing into data centers and they don't
Okay.
necessarily have the right infrastructure for that. So what they're doing now is they're investing heavily into deep tech or chip manufacturers or people that can, let's say, reduce the heating or cooling that's needed for this. Also the grids, because
Right.
powering a data center or powering, let's say, a chip manufacturer is requiring a very different level of cooling and electricity grid systems compared to, let's say, a residential or a commercial one. So that's also something that they're now heavily investing into as well. So yeah.
For this, I'll send to episode number 2, which is already out with Camila Rizzi from Plug and Play. They published a great report. If you haven't seen, we posted the link through this as well on data centers and data center cooling investing. They have a really nice roadmap. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it. So, okay, interesting to hear about the sectors. We'll talk about this a bit after because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask. Before doing so, let's do the yes or no section. It's the exact same thing as what we did before. Supposedly easier, but sometimes it's harder to say yes or no. It's a very drastic answer. But okay, let's try it. So, would you say a pre-seed company has good chances of raising a round with family office in the UAE?
Yes.
Do you think it's easier to do family office raises in the earlier stage in the UAE than it is in the rest of the world?
No.
Do you need to be physically in Dubai to raise from here?
Yes.
Do you say that speaking English is enough to close a deal in the GCC?
100%.
Do GCC investors care about the traction the same way that EU and US VC do?
Yes.
Have you ever passed on a company and then regretted it?
Millions of times.
Okay. Do most EU founders romanticize the whole GCC opportunity because of the money there supposedly is?
Yes.
Is a GCC more relationship driven than merit driven?
Yes.
Would you back a founder that is a student with no revenue and no team?
Yes.
Do you believe the pitch is more important than the pitcher in the GCC?
No.
And do you think the GCC ecosystem will produce unicorns in the next 3 years that nobody is watching out for? Things that are not really known.
Yes, I really hope so.
And maybe the final question, are you having a good time on the show?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. So the question I really want to get into here, actually, we'll go through a few that you answered here. The family office here, you said that it's feasible, but it's not necessarily different from the rest of the world. How about the angel bit, maybe? Because the profiles seem to be different in the GCC, or the money is different, maybe it comes from different resources. So can you tell us a bit more about the different origins of the money in the GCC that might justify different ways of investing in the early stage?
I think a lot of the family offices here are younger, they're not
Okay.
multi-generational family offices that have the structures. They have, let's say, fund managers and they have a full team, so it could just be them. Or a lot of times because they're younger as well, so there's less formal structures in place. So that makes a big difference, which means their relationship matter even more to an extent,
Okay.
because this person is not maybe, let's say, as institutional, so they're looking for betting on stuff that they can understand, or they
Okay.
feel that their value input is cherished more.
What do you think about the flip side of that coin, which is that if you take an investor that seems less structured, it can become a problem later on because I don't know, either it's crowding the cap table, or that more institutional investors will be scared of putting their money because they might think they're not a professional angel. We don't know if they're going to come in and barge in all the board meetings. It's going to be a mess. What do you think of that less sexy side of the coin?
Yeah, yeah, it's a push and pull thing. You know, you can win some, you can lose some things. I just think at the earliest stage, you want to be able to gain enough traction and have the right, let's say, people behind you. And sometimes having less institutional guys means that this means more to them because this
Okay,
is their own personal hard-earned money that they made themselves. So
gotcha.
they want to help it grow. So even if, let's say, they're giving you 50K or 100K, it matters more to them. And they will be like, okay, I'll also open a lot of my doors and network for you as well.
I
So you should
see.
look at it that way. You should look at it less in terms of, let's say, the professionalism that they have, but more in terms of, let's say, the value that they bring.
Okay. And then we had a question about EU founders maybe romanticizing the GCC. The first thing that comes to everyone's mind is GCC has money. I know I'm saying this a little bit in a relatable fashion because when I say I'm from Monaco, people always tell me, there's plenty of money in Monaco. Yeah, people are rich and they have yachts. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're investing in the right place, in the right way, that they know how to do it, or that they just simply do it. Investing in early stage is not always if you look at a family office, they have different types of asset classes. Early stage investment is a rare one and is often something that takes 10, 20% maximum. So maybe there's the same fantasy about Dubai, oil money, like, okay, they have a ton of money, they will put the money everywhere. And you think of that beautifully dressed sheikh with the dashdasha and everything. You think, okay, they have money, they can spend it anywhere. What about the reality and how to nuance this?
Yeah, so around years ago, just during COVID or before COVID, it used to be a lot easier to, let's say, just come here, do a roadshow, collect money and go. But then what happened was that many of the sovereign wealth funds and also the people here realized that they weren't really getting access to success. You know, like they also stopped liking this whole strategy of just like coming, taking money and leaving. So now it's become more that you need to have the right relationships here. You need to spend some time here and you need to maybe open an office or have a real strategy
Okay,
about this market as well, because they want to have local people get jobs, local people also be upskilled and improve the economy and
right.
not just be used as a piggy bank, you know? So I think that's changed to an extent as previously, but I'm not saying it's impossible to raise money. It just means that, let's say, the days of just like doing a roadshow and leaving are just not the same as they used to be pre-COVID.
Right. I'm glad we got to that point because it's a great opener to the part 3 of the podcast about the interests locally. So you're saying that there is a push to develop the ecosystem rather than just taking the money, pump and dump. And so I'm a bit curious when we talked about the GCC as a funding source. Now I want to talk about it as a market. What are the key markets or the key industries that could be exploring the GCC? Say you're a company, you're coming from the rest of the world and you're thinking, okay, which market should we go next? How about the GCC? So what are the key industries that the GCC would be a great market for, or that you invite companies, maybe that's a bit your promoting moment with AvenirX. If there are types of companies that you're looking for specifically because they have a great fit regionally, what would those be? And what are the particularities of this market?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think fintech is great simply because you have a lot of different payment flows that are going through here across border and across, let's say, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East as well. Then you have a lot of stuff that's also happening, let's say, within defense as well now, because as you know, we had the crisis here. So that led to a lot of the countries realizing that they're kind of unprepared. So now
Okay.
they're investing heavily into defense as well to an extent. Smart cities as well, because that's one of the first things you notice when you come here is the scale of construction. Every
Yeah.
single like time you look outside, you just see 10 cranes. Where
Yeah.
I'm living, there's been 3 buildings that have just finished within a year.
Hmm.
That would be like 5 years in Europe, you know, so it's just a lot faster. So yeah, that's another big one as well. E-commerce is quite good as well to an extent
Okay.
because this is a country that loves to consume. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of e-commerce related solutions as well that are coming here to an extent. Ed tech as well, because you have it's these are young demographic countries.
Hmm.
Saudi and the UAE has a huge amount of young people who are hungry and they're looking for new challenges and growth. They're looking, universities are looking, how can we add more digital solutions or more AI enabled solutions for our founders, for our kids? So that also makes a big difference as well, I would say. And then the final thing that I'd say is I think deep tech, because they really want to they have things that we call a digital sandbox. So what they do is the UAE government has a lot of different sandboxes where you can kind of test things in without, let's say, having to go through all the regulatory, let's say, processes. And that leads to, let's say, a lot of cool solutions within agri-tech, construction, mining, and yeah, like data infrastructures that I was talking about already to be done without, let's say, having to do all the regulatory hoopla that you need to do in Europe or the US.
Okay. I see. It's very interesting because it resonates a lot with, I had a conversation with a couple of friends in Kuwait, and they were saying a lot about the consumer side. The society likes to consume, and also the services industry was a big one. So yeah, thanks for defining those markets and being conscious of your time. Maybe what are your final closing words? Say, let's try to summarize a little bit everything that we discussed today in the top 3 key things. If you are either a company or also a fund, let's maybe put the accent on the fund because we've talked mainly about companies up to now. What are the key things I should consider about the GCC? Maybe the top 3 things. If I want to plan a trip to Dubai, what are the things that I should keep in my mind? Let's do it from an investor perspective this time.
Yeah, yeah. So don't come in summer, first of all, simply because it's too hot, and everyone knows it. So they all travel as well.
And they're in
So
London then.
they're all in London. Actually, technically, if you want a hotel for super cheap, now is a great time because you can get some excellent deals. But yeah, I think plan trips around big events like GITEX,
Gotcha.
or LEAP, which is happening in Saudi in August, because that's a way to steroid your, let's say, exposure to the market, because you can
Right.
learn more in 3 or 4 days than you would with a month of, let's say, struggling and hustling,
Right.
So I'd say that's a good way to do things. And then again, first and second degree connections, check who you have in your first, second degree connections and leverage those to kind of open certain doors for you. I'd say
Right.
that's how I do it. And then finally, the last thing as well is just have patience, so because you need to build the right relationships, and relationships take time. They need
Right.
nurturing. It's like a farmer, like you can't expect to put water on the ground and expect the crop to come
Yep.
the next day.
Gotcha.
It takes time and patience, but if you do the right foundations, the crops grow beautifully.
Yeah, I heard of big events. I had a friend who made really good contacts. Some of them came on the show as well through the Web Summit in Qatar. There was a big one as well. And
Yeah.
finally, if we go to the tip of that pyramid we mentioned earlier, how about funds looking for funding from? Is there a lot of family offices doing fund of fund activity or PE VC? Maybe the layer above the VC. What does it look like in that sphere? Is it less developed, more developed?
It is a bit less developed for sure, but you have a couple of very interesting sovereign funds here. I know DFDF, which is the Dubai Future Founders District Fund. They do investment directly into fund of funds, and they do that into European and American ones as well.
Okay.
One of the things that people don't realize is that it's the United Arab Emirates. There's 7 different Emirates. They all have
Right.
different markets, different understandings, and
Gotcha.
different funds, and let's say different motivations. If you understand how to kind of position yourself to the different ones, you can
Okay.
suddenly be in a market that you have less competition with, because you're not just going for the shiny toys in Dubai, but you could also be
Yep.
going for something else in Ras Al Khaimah or Sharjah if you have the right positioning.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. And outside of those more, you said those sovereign funds, so belong to sovereign families and to those Emirates. What about other more maybe institutional funds of funds? Is there something like this? And if yes, how do you access those? Is it again a matter of going to the right event with them, or how do you access these?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, because you won't be able to access them at the events. You might be able to access gatekeepers at events, and that would take you, let's say, 2 to 6 months of, let's say, right massaging of relationships to
Gotcha.
enter into. I don't know. I think with that one, there isn't that many institutions besides the, let's say, the sovereign wealth funds here in terms of
Okay.
fund of funds. So you need to be targeting, let's say, the smaller checks, to kind of write you 500,000, 1 million through family offices that are present
Okay.
here. There's a lot of summits that happen.
Okay.
So I already know there's 2 or 3 summits happening towards the end of this year where there's going to be deploying family offices that are going to be coming in, and you could probably sign up
Right.
for that, or be one of the GPs presenting. So
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, that's probably the last, the concluding word. If there's anything you need, it sounds like you're very well informed. And whether you're a founder or a fund and you're looking to explore the GCC, please reach out to Rohan. Rohan, again, thank you so much for joining us on the show, for sharing all this wisdom and opening this new geography. It feels like I'm removing the clouds, like an Age of Empire kind of map, where it's like discovering a new
yeah,
region. And
right.
it's really nice and appreciated. So thank you so much. We will put all of your credentials, your details, everything in the description. If you're listening to this episode on Spotify and want to see our beautiful faces and understand all the references we made to them bikes because of the background you have, please go check the episode on YouTube. And for anything else we'll be sharing, we will have all of that on LinkedIn and all of the learnings as well, detailed and everything. We will cut all of the key learnings and put them all highlighted in the right place. Rohan, thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch for sure. Cheers. Bye-bye.